The massive space station hung in the dark void above the Sara Prime, glowing like a second moon. Inside its grand chamber, hundreds of alien beings sat in rows that stretched up toward the curved ceiling. The air smelled wrong to many different species breathing, too many chemical signatures mixing together. Ambassador Tommen stood at the central podium, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. He called the meeting to order, but his voice shook. The numbers he was about to share would terrify everyone present. The war between the Krellian Dominion and the Vaxxer Collective had been going on for 3 standard years now. At first, the Galactic Council thought it would burn itself out quickly. Both sides would realize the cost was too high and negotiate peace. That hadn't happened. 14 billion souls lost in the past lunar cycle alone, Taman announced. The chamber went silent. Some delegates covered their faces with whatever appendages they possessed. Others simply stared ahead in shock. 14 billion in just 1 month. The number was incomprehensible. Chancellor Yuri stood up from her seat in the Hesperan Alliance section. She was older than most delegates, her skin marked with the silver lines that her species developed with age. She had seen 3 major wars in her lifetime, but nothing like this. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing in front of her seat. "We must end this war," she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Not next year. Not next month. Now, before there is nothing left to save." She paused, seeming to gather courage for what came next. "I propose we contact Earth." The reaction was immediate and visceral. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting in dozens of languages. Some were calling Yuri insane. Others were demanding her removal from the council. High Magistrate De Hyen, of the Orvelian Consortium, slammed both fists on his podium. His scales flushing deep purple, the color of alarm and rage among his people. "Have you lost your mind?" De Hyen roared. "Do you remember Kepler Station? Do you remember what one human did?" The chamber quieted somewhat. Everyone remembered Kepler Station. It had happened 2 years ago, and the incident was still classified at the highest levels. But rumors spread, especially among military personnel. A Krellian assault team, 12 of their finest warriors, had boarded the station to take hostages during a diplomatic dispute. Station security consisted of 1 officer on duty that shifted a young human woman named G-Wu. 17 minutes later. The assault team was neutralized. Not killed, which might have been expected. Neutralized. Q-Wu had used fire suppression systems to disorient them, vented atmosphere in specific corridors to herd them, and turned the station's own infrastructure into a maze of traps. By the time backup arrived, the Krellians were tied up with cargo netting, looking shell-shocked. Ji-Wu was calmly filling out incident reports. The Krellians were a warrior species. They had been bred and trained for combat over 10,000 years of cultural evolution. Losing to a single security guard from a species that had only joined the galactic community 20 standard cycles ago was humiliating beyond measure. The Dominion refused to discuss the incident publicly. Counselor Hannah from the Scientific Concordat stood next. She was small even for her species, but her voice was clear and steady. "Let me share what we know about humans from a biological standpoint," she said. She activated her datapad, and a hologram appeared above the central floor, showing Earth rotating slowly. Gravity on their homeworld is 1.4 times our standard. Their bones are denser than most species. Their muscles are optimized for that higher gravity. When they come to our space stations with standard gravity, they're essentially operating in conditions that make them stronger and faster than they are at home. She changed the hologram to show human cellular structure. Their atmosphere has oxygen concentrations that would be toxic to 70% of Council species. They evolved in what we would consider a mildly hostile environment. Their healing capabilities are remarkable injuries that would permanently disable most species or temporary setbacks for humans. The hologram shifted again, showing a human cardiovascular system. Then there's their adrenaline response. When threatened or stressed, their bodies flood with chemicals that increase strength, speed, pain tolerance, and mental focus. It's a temporary boost, but during that time, a human can perform feats that seem impossible. Another delegate called out. But there are only 11 billion people in one star system. Surely their numbers don't matter. Ambassador Minji from the Zephyrian Trade Federation laughed bitterly. She pulled up economic data that filled the holographic display with graphs and charts. In 20 years, human corporations have disrupted 7 major galactic industries. 7. They don't sleep as much as we do. Most species need 10 to 12 hours of rest per cycle. Humans function on 6 or 7. They can work longer, adapt faster, and they have this disturbing tendency to view obstacles as challenges rather than barriers. She highlighted one particular graph. Human trade vessels have the best safety records in the galaxy, not because they're more careful, but because when something goes wrong, they fix it. There was a merchant captain named Taeyong, whose ship was attacked by pirates. The pirates breached his hull. Instead of surrendering, this captain vented his ship's atmosphere to explosive decompress the boarding party, then repressurized and continued his delivery route. He didn't even request medical assistance. Minji looked around the chamber. These are their merchants? They're civilians. Now imagine what their military could do. The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humanity's small numbers would keep them from making a real difference. Others pointed to human history, which the Council had studied extensively. Humans had fought thousands of wars among themselves using primitive technology, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, biological warfare. They had killed hundreds of millions of their own species over resources, ideology, and territory. What happens when we give them plasma rifles and warships? Someone asked. As the station's rotation brought dawn to this side of the Sarah Prime, Ambassador Tommen called for a vote. The resolution was simple. Under no circumstances would Earth be contacted about the war. No recruitment offers. No requests for aid. No mention of the conflict's existence in diplomatic communications with human representatives. The vote was unanimous. Every single delegate voted yes. A formal document was drafted and sealed with the sigils of all attending species. Resolution 3741 Omega. Containment Protocol for Species Designation Terra-Human. It was classified at the highest level. Only council members and senior military commanders would know it existed. Ambassador. Taemin felt relief wash over him as the seals were applied. They had made the right choice. The war would be terrible, but at least it would remain conventional, predictable, something they understood. Then his aide. A young Valyrian named Sora approached him with a datapad. Her crystalline structure was flickering a sign of extreme distress. She whispered something that made all the color drain from Taemin's body. The Krellian. Dominion had already sent an envoy to Earth. The message had been transmitted 4 days ago. The humans had received the offer. They were considering it. Ambassador Tommen looked up at the assembled council, still celebrating their unanimous decision, and felt something he rarely experienced. Pure, cold terror. They were already too late. Secretary General Hyan Wu read the message for the 7th time that morning. His office overlooked Geneva, and the early morning sun reflected off the glass towers of the United Nations complex. The Krellian transmission sat on his desk in printed form, even though he had digital copies everywhere. Sometimes seeing words on paper made them more real. The offer was straightforward and generous. Fight with the Krellian Dominion against the Vaxxer Collective. In return, humanity would receive advanced faster-than-light technology, territorial rights to 14 uninhabited star systems, and full voting membership in the Galactic Senate. The Krellians promised wealth that would transform Earth's economy overnight. They promised power that would make humanity a major galactic player. All Earth had to do was go to war. General Sang-hee stood at the window, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She was a career military officer who had seen combat in 3 different theaters on Earth. She knew what war cost. Not in abstract numbers, but in faces, in names, in families destroyed and futures erased. It's a trap, she said quietly. They're desperate. You don't offer this much unless you're losing badly. The door opened and Jae-sung entered carrying a thick folder. He was the Secretary General's Chief of Staff, a man who had spent 30 years in diplomatic service and could read between the lines of any message. He dropped the folder on Hyan-Wu's desk. Intelligence analysis, Jae-sung said. Both the Krellians and Vaxxer are brutal, authoritarian regimes. The war started over mining rights in the Hylian sector. It's escalated into a battle of egos between two tyrants. Neither side deserves our support. He paused. But if we refuse, we look weak, isolated, like we're afraid to engage with galactic politics. Minister Yoonji arrived next with her technical team. She had been studying Krellian technology since first contact, reverse engineering what little information was publicly available. Her assessment was clinical and precise. Their FTL technology is real and impressive. It would advance our capabilities by at least 50 years. But these star systems they're offering? She pulled up a star map. All 14 are in contested territory. We wouldn't inherit gifts, we'd inherit battlefields. We'd be fighting to hold them before we even finished surveying them. The debate moved to the World Security Council. Representatives from every nation on Earth join via secure holographic link. The chamber filled with translucent figures, each one representing billions of people with their own opinions about humanity's future. Ambassador Kwan, representing the Pacific Coalition, argued strongly for acceptance. This is our chance to leap forward, to become a real power in the galaxy. If we turn this down, we might never get another opportunity. Ambassador Bora, from the European Federation, shook her head. Power built on other people's blood doesn't last. We'd be selling our souls for technology. We'll develop ourselves eventually. And we'd be making enemies of everyone the Vaxxer are allied with. The arguments went back and forth for hours. Some pointed out Earth's defensive limitations. Humanity had only 43 deep space warships. Others noted that sitting out the war might make both sides angry, leaving Earth isolated when it ended. During a recess, Hyan-Wu walked through the gardens outside the complex. The flowers were blooming, and he could hear birds singing. It was hard to believe that light years away. Billions were dying in a war that had nothing to do with Earth. He found Ambassador Dayun waiting for him by a fountain. She was Thechin, one of the few alien diplomats who had genuinely befriended humanity rather than merely tolerated them. She looked nervous. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something that will cost me my position if anyone finds out I told you," she explained. Resolution 3741 Omega, the Galactic Council's secret vote to keep Earth out of the war at all costs. She told him about the debate, about the fear that filled the chamber when someone suggested contacting humanity. She showed him classified files about the Kepler station incident, including footage he had never seen. The footage showed Ji-Woo, a human security officer, moving through the station with calm precision. She wasn't panicking or fighting out of rage. She was thinking, planning, using every resource available to her. The Krellians, trained warriors all, couldn't adapt to her tactics. They were following their training, doing everything correctly according to their doctrine. It didn't matter. Ji-Woo was rewriting the rules as she went. "There are other examples," Dayun said. She told him about Taeyang, the merchant captain who survived the pirate attack. About Minesio, the engineer who kept a failing space station running. For 2 weeks beyond its designed limits through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. The galactic community has a saying now, Dayun said. Humans don't think outside the box. They don't acknowledge the box exists. She looked at Hyan-Wu seriously. They didn't exclude you from the war because they think you're weak. They excluded you because they're terrified of what you might do. Hyan-Wu thanked her and returned to the council chambers. His mind was working through the implications. The Krellians had violated the council's resolution by contacting the Earth. That meant they were more desperate than anyone realized. It also meant the council had been discussing humanity, analyzing humans, trying to predict what they would do before the final vote. Hyan-Wu called for the chamber's attention. "I have something to show you," he said. He played an intercepted transmission. Intelligence services had been monitoring galactic communications since Earth first joined the galactic community. This particular message had arrived hours after the Krellian offer. It was from the Vaxxer Collective. Their offer was almost identical to the Krellians. Technology, territory, political power, all in exchange for military support against their enemies. Both sides wanted humanity. Both sides saw humans as attack dogs they could unleash on their opponents. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Every representative felt insulted. Earth wasn't a mercenary force for hire. Humanity had principles. The vote was unanimous. Earth declined both offers. But Haiyan-Wu wasn't finished. He worked with diplomat Su Jin to draft a response that would be transmitted to both warring parties and the Galactic Council simultaneously. The message was brief and clear. Humanity thanks the Krellian Dominion and the Vaxxer Collective for their offers of partnership. We must respectfully decline. Earth will not choose sides in your conflict. However, we offer our services as neutral mediators. If both parties wish to pursue peace talks, we will provide a neutral location and experienced negotiators. We believe all wars must end eventually. Why not end this one at a table rather than in ashes? The choice is yours. Su Jin looked at the message and smiled. This is going to make a lot of people very angry. Good Haiyan-Wu replied. Maybe anger will shock them into thinking clearly. The transmission went out on open channels. Every species in the galaxy with receivers would pick it up. There was no way to contain it or spin it. Earth's position was now public knowledge. The response from the Galactic Council arrived within hours. Ambassador Taemin's message consisted of a single word: no. No explanation. No justification. Just a flat refusal to acknowledge Earth's mediation offer. But something else happened that the Council didn't anticipate. Civilian populations across hundreds of worlds received the transmission. They heard Earth's offer. They heard one voice saying, maybe we should stop killing each other in a galaxy where everyone else just accepted that the war would continue until one side collapsed. On the Sara Prime, a young activist named Yuna organized a protest outside the council chambers. Within days, similar protests erupted on dozens of worlds. The peace movement that had been quietly growing in the shadows suddenly had a rallying point. If humans newcomers who barely understood galactic politics could offer peace, why couldn't the established powers do the same? General Sung-hee watched the news reports of protests spreading across the galaxy. We just destabilized galactic politics, she observed. Oh. We offered peace, Haiyan-Wu corrected. If that destabilizes things, the system was broken to begin with. Xun was less optimistic. Both the Krellians and Vaxxer are going to blame us for this. We embarrassed them publicly. Made them look like warmongers who rejected a reasonable offer. They're going to respond. How? Minister Yoonji asked. Director Chan-woo from Intelligence Services answered that question. They'll try to silence us. Make an example of Earth. Show the galaxy that upstart species can't challenge the established order. He pulled up deep space monitoring data. I'm reading unusual fleet movements from both the Dominion and the Collective. Ships grouping in formations that suggest preparation for long-distance deployment. General Song-hee straightened. Toward Earth. Can't confirm yet. But if I were them and wanted to send a message, Chan-woo didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Haiyan-Wu looked at his assembled team. At the military officers and diplomats and scientists who had helped him navigate this crisis, send out alerts to all Earth Defense Forces. High alert status. If they're coming, we need to be ready. Ready for what? Someone asked. They have hundreds of warships each. We have 43. General Sang-hee smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we'll have to make those 43 count. We'll show them why the Council was afraid. 3 weeks passed after Earth's public offer of mediation. The war didn't slow down, it accelerated. The Krellian Dominion was insulted by humanity's rejection and the implication that they needed outside help to win. Launched a massive offensive against Vaxxer supply lines. 17 cargo convoys were destroyed in coordinated strikes. Millions of tons of supplies turned into expanding clouds of debris. The Vaxxer response was immediate and brutal. They fired kinetic weapons at 2 Krellian colony worlds. The projectiles were simply massive chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. When they hit, they released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. Cities vanished. The death toll climbed into the millions within hours. Both sides seemed determined to prove they didn't need humanity's help or interference. But something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. Earth's message had reached civilian populations everywhere. People were listening. On the Sarah Prime, activist Una stood before a crowd of 10,000. Her voice was amplified across the plaza as she held up a printed copy of Earth's transmission. One species, new to the galaxy, had the courage to say what we've all been thinking. That this war is madness. That peace is possible. Are we going to let our leaders ignore this opportunity? The crowd roared its approval. Similar protests erupted on other worlds. On Valorian Prime, crystalline beings gathered in silence, their bodies flickering in coordinated patterns that spelled out "choose peace and light." On Hesperan, workers staged strikes, refusing to manufacture military supplies until the government considered negotiations. The peace movement spread like wildfire, and at its center was Earth's offer. Humans had become symbols of something the galaxy had forgotten, the possibility of choosing a different path. Inside the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Taman called yet another emergency session. He looked exhausted. His crystalline structure had developed stress fractures visible even from across the large chamber. "Hi, Magistrate Day." High-end scales had faded to a dull gray that indicated chronic stress among his people. "The protests are affecting supply chains," Counselor Hannah reported. 3 major industrial worlds have reduced military production by 40%. Transport unions are threatening to refuse military cargo shipments. "We're losing control of the civilian population." Ambassador Minji added more bad news. "Economic projections show that if these protests continue, galactic trade will contract by 15% this quarter. Both the Dominion and Collective are struggling to maintain their war efforts without full civilian support." Chancellor Yuri stood, looking older than she had just weeks ago. "We have a choice. We can acknowledge Earth's offer and use their success in rallying civilian support as cover for opening peace talks. Or we can try to suppress the protests and maintain the status quo." "Suppress them how?" Daehyun demanded. "Economic sanctions against worlds that harbor protesters? Military action against our own citizens? We'll become the tyrants that Earth implied we are." "Then what do you suggest?" Taman asked, genuine desperation in his voice. Before anyone could answer, Ambassador Daehyun stood up from the gallery where disgraced diplomats were required to sit. Security moved to remove her, but her voice carried across the chamber. "You could accept Earth's offer." Taman raised a hand, stopping security. "You have no right to speak here, Daehyun. You violated your oath." "I told humans the truth because someone needed to," Daehyun replied. "And what did they do with that information? Did they blackmail us? Expose our fear? No, they offered peace. They didn't use our vulnerability against us. They tried to help." She looked around at the assembled delegates. "Maybe we're afraid of the wrong thing. Maybe we should be more afraid of what we're becoming than what humans might do." Her words hung in the silence. Then security escorted her out. But several delegates were nodding thoughtfully. The seed had been planted. On Earth. Secretary General Hyun-woo watched the galactic situation develop with mixed feelings. His gambit had worked better than expected by offering peace publicly. Humanity had positioned itself as reasonable while making both warring parties look stubborn and aggressive. But success carried its own dangers. Chief of Staff Jae-soon entered his office with the latest intelligence reports. "The peace movement is growing, but it's making both the Dominion and Collective very angry. They're blaming us for undermining their war efforts." "We offered mediation," Hyun-woo said. "We can't control how civilians across the galaxy respond to that offer. They don't see it that way. They see us as troublemakers who disrupted the established order." Jae-soon placed a report on the desk. "Deep space monitoring has confirmed unusual fleet movements. Krellian vessels grouping in Sector 7, Vaxxer ships assembling near the Helix Nebula. Both formations are moving toward the Sol system." General Sung-hee was summoned immediately. She studied the fleet compositions and trajectory data. "They're coming to make an example of us. Show the galaxy what happens to species that interfere in affairs beyond their understanding." Minister Yoonji joined the meeting with Director Chanwoo from Intelligence. Yoonji pulled up tactical data. The Krellians are sending 50 warships. The Vaxxer have 32. We have 43 ships capable of deep space combat. Can we win? Hyenwoo asked directly. Saying he considered carefully. In a conventional fleet battle, using standard galactic tactics, no, we'd be overwhelmed. But we don't have to fight conventionally. She smiled slightly. Director Chanwoo, show them what your team discovered. Chanwoo activated a holographic display showing galactic military doctrine. Centuries of tactical development were documented here, studied by every military academy across known space. The patterns were clear. They all fight the same way, Chanwoo explained. Ship formations, engagement ranges, boarding protocols, everything follows established doctrine because it's proven effective over thousands of years. But proven effective means predictable. He pulled up more data. We've been analyzing their responses to various situations. They're like chess players who've memorized all the Grandmaster games. They know the right moves, but they struggle when someone does something unexpected. So we do unexpected things, Jae-zoon said. We use the Sol system itself as a weapon, Song-hee confirmed. Jupiter's moons, Saturn's rings, the asteroid belt, we turn our home territory into the most dangerous place in the galaxy to attack. Hyenwoo made the decision quickly. Alert all defense forces. Begin implementing contingency plans. And someone contact Admiral Dong Haeon, want him coordinating our defense strategy. Admiral Dong Haeon took command from Space Station Freedom's watch. Orbiting high above Earth, he was a veteran of 3 naval engagements and had studied military history from every human culture. He understood one critical truth. Defenders who know their territory have advantages that no amount of firepower can overcome. He issued orders to the Earth fleet. Ships were to deploy sensor networks and weapons platforms throughout the solar system. Not randomly, but strategically. Jupiter's many moons became forward observation posts. Saturn's rings would hide kinetic kill. Vehicles, simple chunks of metal that would be nearly invisible until they collided with something at orbital velocities. The asteroid belt was mapped down to every rock larger than a car. Meanwhile, on the Sara Prime, the Galactic Council tried to contact Krellian warlord Vexstar and Vaxxer Supreme Commander Nalvex. They wanted to de-escalate before the situation spiraled completely out of control. Both leaders refused to take the Council's calls. Ambassador Taemin felt genuine fear for the first time in his long career. If they attack Earth, if humanity fights back as effectively as we fear, this becomes something else entirely. It's not just a war between the Dominion and Collective anymore. It becomes a war between established galactic powers and the species that prove they can defend themselves against anyone. Chancellor Yuri agreed. And if the humans win, actually defeat both fleets, every minor species, every colony world, every group that's felt oppressed by the major powers will see humans as an alternative. A protector, maybe. Or worse, an example to follow. Worse, Counselor Hannah asked. Worse than the current war that's killed tens of billions? Worse because it would mean change, Yuri said quietly. Real change. The end of the established order. Everything we've built over millennia would be questioned. The Council could only watch as the Krellian and Vaxxer fleets approached Earth. They sent diplomatic protests that were ignored. They threatened sanctions that nobody cared about. They were becoming irrelevant in real time, and they knew it. On Earth. People watched the news reports with a mixture of fear and determination. The government had been honest about the threat. 2 alien fleets were coming, likely to attack, and Earth's military was outnumbered. But humanity had survived worse. Ice ages, plagues, world wars. They would survive this too, or die trying. In military bases across the planet, personnel reported for duty. Pilots climbed into fighters. Ship crews ran through final system checks. Ground forces prepared for the possibility of enemy landing parties. Everyone understood the stakes. Secretary-General Hyenwoo addressed the world in a broadcast from Geneva. We offered peace, and they answered with war. We sought dialogue, and they sent warships, albeit Humanity has always been at its best when the odds were worst. Today, we show the galaxy who we are. Not warriors by choice, but survivors by necessity. Not conquerors, but defenders. We will protect our home, our future, and our right to exist. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Admiral Dong Haiyan, watching the approaching fleets on his tactical displays, sent a message to all Earth vessels. They think they know how this will go. They've run the simulations, studied the tactics, calculated the odds. They're wrong. Show them what happens when you fight humans on their home territory. The Krellian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system 48 hours later, exactly on schedule. Behind them, still approaching, was the Vaxxer fleet. Both came to intimidate Earth, to crush humanity's presumption, to send a message to the galaxy about the cost of interfering in affairs that didn't concern them. They were about to learn a very different lesson. The Krellian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a formation designed to inspire terror. 50 warships arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns at the edge of the Sol system. At the center was the massive dreadnought fist of Dominion, bristling with weapon systems that could reduce a planet's surface to molten glass. Warlord Vexstar stood on his command bridge, satisfaction warming his chest. The human fleet was visible on his displays, 43 ships forming a defensive screen around the inner planets. They looked small and inadequate. This would be over quickly. He opened communications on all frequencies. Humans of Earth, your interference in galactic affairs ends now. Withdraw your mediation offer. Issue a public apology for your presumptuousness. Do this within 12 of your hours, and the Dominion will show mercy. Vexstar expected panic. Maybe desperate negotiations. Perhaps immediate surrender from a species that controlled just one star system facing the military. Might have an empire spanning 200 worlds. What he received instead made him question his translation software. Admiral Dong Haiyan's response was calm and professional. Warlord Vexstar, you are in violation of Sol system sovereignty. Withdraw your vessels beyond the heliosphere immediately, or you will be considered hostile. This is your only warning. The Krellian bridge crew stared at their displays in stunned silence. Admiral Krentok, Vexstar's second-in-command, analyzed the human fleet composition again. 43 ships versus 50 Krellian vessels, most of which were larger and more heavily armed. The humans were outmatched in every measurable category. They must be bluffing, Krentok reported. Standard inferior force intimidation tactics. They hope to appear stronger than they are. Once we demonstrate our firepower, they'll surrender, Vexstar agreed. Fire warning shots. Let them see what our weapons can do. 3 Krellian destroyers unleashed plasma bursts that lit up the dark space between the fleets. The shots were carefully aimed to dissipate harmlessly, but they demonstrated the destructive power the Dominion could bring to bear. It was textbook galactic warfare show strength. Allow the enemy to save face by backing down. The human response wasn't in any textbook. Instead of retreating or opening negotiations, the Earth fleet divided into 3 groups and began moving on unexpected vectors. Captain Biora led Group 1 toward Jupiter with the carrier Indomitable at its center. Captain Wuzhen took Group 2 toward Saturn, aboard the battleship Resilient. Captain Junho commanded the smallest group, angling toward the asteroid belt. Admiral Krentok's confusion was evident in his voice. They're splitting their forces, in the face of superior numbers. That's tactical suicide. Vexstar felt the first stirring of doubt. No competent commander would divide their fleet when already outnumbered, which meant either the humans were incompetent or they had a plan that Krellian tactical analysis couldn't predict. He chose to believe the former. Pursue Group 1. Will. Destroy them before they can regroup and regroup. Demonstrate the cost of defiance. The Krellian fleet maintained its tight formation as it pursued the Indomitable toward Jupiter. This was standard doctrine, combined firepower and mutual support. Every ship covered the other's blind spots. Every weapon system overlapped to create zones of certain death for enemy vessels, Captain. Bora led them deeper into Jupiter's gravitational sphere, her flight path appearing erratic and panicked. She wove between the gas giant's outer moons, her ships barely maintaining cohesion. "She's losing control," Krentok observed. "Her formation is falling apart." They were wrong. Captain Biora was a former fighter pilot who had studied ancient Earth naval tactics extensively. She particularly admired Admiral Yi Sun-sin, who had defeated numerically superior forces centuries ago by using terrain and enemy psychology against them. Biora wasn't panicking. She was baiting a trap. As the Krellian fleet entered Jupiter's gravitational field, still maintaining their rigid formation, Biora transmitted a coded signal. Dozens of devices her ships had deployed earlier activated simultaneously. They weren't weapons, they were sensors and communications jammers. Hidden among Jupiter's moons, and in the upper atmosphere of the gas giant itself, suddenly, the Krellian formation flew blind. Their sensors showed hundreds of false contacts. Ship-to-ship communications became garbled with static and interference. The precise coordination that made their formation effective vanished in seconds. "Break formation," Vexstar ordered. "Establish visual range protocols." That was exactly what Biora had been waiting for. The Indomitable and her group stopped running. They turned and accelerated directly at the confused Krellian fleet, launching fighters and missiles with sophisticated targeting systems that adapted in real time to enemy countermeasures. The Krellians had never faced such weapons. Their point defense systems were designed for predictable ballistic trajectories. These missiles changed course mid-flight, coordinated with each other, and found gaps in the defensive fire. 7 Krellian destroyers took critical damage in the first 30 seconds of engagement. Near Saturn, Captain Wujin triggered his own trap. As a portion of the Krellian fleet tried to break away and assist Vexstar, they found Saturn's rings had been seeded with kinetic fiament-powered projectiles that were nearly invisible to sensors. At orbital velocities, even a small rock became a devastating weapon. 3 more Krellian ships suffered hull breaches as they tried to navigate through the minefield that Captain Wujin had spent days preparing, and in the asteroid belt. Captain Junhoa, former mining engineer who knew every significant rock in the belt, used precision gravitational calculations to redirect asteroids into intercept courses. The Krellians focused on the human ships. Didn't notice the multi-ton rocks bearing down on them until impact was unavoidable within 90 minutes. The Krellian fleet had lost 14 vessels and suffered significant damage to 23 more. They hadn't destroyed a single human ship. Warlord Vexstar reviewed the tactical data 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. The humans were using their entire solar system as a weapon. They were fighting in ways that violated every principle of conventional galactic warfare. They weren't following any recognizable pattern. Then the situation became infinitely worse. The Vaxxer fleet, arriving in the middle of the battle, saw the chaos and made an assumption. Surely the Krellians, with superior numbers, were winning. Supreme Commander Nelvix decided to strike while both enemies were engaged, hoping to eliminate Krellian and human forces simultaneously, and claim credit for ending the war in one decisive blow. His 32 warships entered the Sol system and began firing on both fleets without warning. Admiral Dong Haiyan, coordinating Earth's defense from Freedom's Watch, saw the new contacts on his displays and made an instant decision. He opened a direct channel to Warlord Vexstar. "Warlord, it appears we have a common enemy in the system. I propose a temporary ceasefire. We can resume our disagreement after dealing with the Vaxxer." Vexstar's pride screamed at him to refuse. To continue fighting the presumptuous humans who had bloodied his fleet, but Admiral Krentok was right beside him, showing casualty reports and damage assessments. They couldn't fight a 2-front battle, not after the losses they'd already suffered. "Agreed," Vexstar said through gritted teeth. Temporary ceasefire. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The human fleet didn't simply fight. Alongside the Krellians, they transformed the battlefield itself. Admiral Dong Haiyan transmitted targeting data directly to Krellian ships, highlighting Vaxxer vessels in advantageous positions. Captain Bora coordinated movements so that Vaxxer forces found themselves caught between human and Krellian firing solutions. Captain Wu Jin used his remaining kinetic weapons to herd Vaxxer ships into zones where Krellian plasma weapons could devastate them. Supreme, Commander Nalvex, realized too late that he was facing something unprecedented. Two fleets that had been fighting each other moments ago were now coordinating with the precision of a single unified force. The humans were acting as a force multiplier, making the damaged Krellian fleet twice as effective as it should be. His ships began taking catastrophic damage. 12 Vaxxer vessels were destroyed outright. 9 more were disabled, their systems wrecked beyond the ability to maintain formation. The remainder fled, jumping to faster than light speed and abandoning the battle. Silence settled over the Sol system. The human and Krellian fleets held position, weapons still charged. Neither side certain what happened next. Secretary-General Hyan Wu's voice broke the silence. His transmission was broadcast to every ship in the system and to the Galactic Council monitoring from the Sara Prime. Warlord Vexstar, you came to intimidate Earth. Instead, you've experienced what happens when you underestimate us. We didn't want this fight. Every casualty in this battle is a tragedy we'll mourn, but we were prepared to finish it if necessary. He paused. Our original offer stands. Mediation and peace. You can continue this war, continue losing ships and warriors, continue bleeding your empire, or you can accept that there might be another way. Warlord Vexstar looked at his displays. 14 ships destroyed, 23 damaged, and his pride wounded more deeply than any weapon could cut. His elite fleet, trained in tactics refined over millennia, had been defeated by a species that joined the galactic community just 20 years ago. He looked at Admiral Krentok, saw the same shock and respect in his officers' eyes. They had lost not because the humans were stronger, but because humans didn't fight like anyone else. They used physics and creativity and the terrain itself. They coordinated with former enemies in the middle of combat. They adapted faster than any tactical computer could predict. For the first time in his military career, Vexstar felt something he'd never experienced before. Not anger or shame, though he felt those too. What settled in his chest was cold. Genuine fear of what humanity represented. If they could do this while defending just one star system, what could they do if they decided to actually go to war? I will consult with the Dominion's High Council, Vexstar said finally. But personally, Warlord, I support accepting your mediation offer. Across the galaxy on the Sara Prime, the Galactic Council watched the battle footage in stunned silence. Every fear they'd expressed, every concern they'd raised about humanity, it had all been proven justified. And terrifyingly, the humans had held back. They could have destroyed both fleets completely. Instead, they'd offered peace even while demonstrating overwhelming tactical superiority. Hi, Magistrate Dayhain spoke into the silence. We were right to fear them. But perhaps Dayun was also right. Perhaps we should have been more afraid of what we were, becoming than what they might do. Resolution 3741 Amiga suddenly seemed very foolish indeed. News of the Battle of Sol system spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Civilian networks on hundreds of worlds showed footage that military sensors couldn't contain quickly enough. Populations saw what their governments had tried to hide. Humans didn't just fight. They fundamentally changed how warfare worked. On the Sara Prime, the Galactic Council chamber was in chaos again. Delegates shouted over each other, demanding explanations and action. Ambassador Taman had given up trying to maintain order. His crystalline body had developed so many stress fractures that he refracted light in broken patterns. Hi, Magistrate. Dayhain's voice cut through the noise. They formed an alliance with the Krellians in the middle of combat. Do you understand what that means? That level of tactical flexibility, that ability to instantly coordinate with a force you were fighting moments earlier, it's beyond anything in our military doctrine. Counselor Hannah pulled up her analysis, her hands shaking as she manipulated the holographic displays. 3 human ships took damage. Just 3, and all of them are already being repaired. They lost 0 vessels. Meanwhile, the combined Krellian and Vaxxer fleets lost 26 ships destroyed and dozens more crippled. She looked around the chamber. Every projection we made about human combat capability was wrong. Severely, dangerously wrong. Ambassador Minjay stood, her expression grim. The economic implications are clear. If humanity applies this same innovative thinking to commerce and industry, they'll dominate every market they enter within a generation. Their ability to see problems differently, to create solutions nobody else imagined, that's not just a military advantage. Chancellor Yuri addressed the council with the weariness of someone who had seen her worst predictions come true. We have two paths forward. We acknowledge Earth's mediation offer and use their victory to justify peace talks. Or we attempt to isolate them diplomatically and economically until they're no longer a factor in galactic affairs. From the gallery where disgraced diplomats sat, Dayun laughed. The sound was bitter and loud enough that security moved toward her, but Ambassador Taman raised a hand to stop them. "Something amuses you, Dayun?" he asked. She stood, speaking clearly despite having no official right to address the council. "You think you can quarantine a species that just defeated two of the galaxy's most powerful military forces? They'll work around any restriction you impose within a year. They'll find loopholes you didn't know existed. They'll turn your own rules against you." She paused. "I told Secretary General Haiyan Wu about Resolution 3741 Omega because I believed honesty mattered more than maintaining our secrets. The humans didn't use that information to blackmail us or expose our fear. They just offered peace. What does it say about us that we're more terrified of peace than of war?" The chamber fell silent. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. Dayun's words had struck deeper than they wanted to admit. In the Sol system, aboard the damaged dreadnought Fist of Dominion, Warlord Vexstar met with Secretary General Haiyan Wu via holographic communication. The human leader appeared calm and professional, showing no signs of arrogance despite his fleet's overwhelming victory. Warlord Haiyan Wu began, "I want you to understand something important. We took no pleasure in this battle. Every human casualties, despite what the reports might suggest as someone's child, someone's parent, someone who will be mourned. We're not warriors by choice. We're survivors by necessity." Vexstar studied the human carefully. In his culture, victory was meant to be celebrated with displays of dominance. Yet this human seemed genuinely sorrowful about the conflict. "How did you coordinate with my fleet so effectively?" The tactical integration should have required days of planning. Admiral Dong Haiyan, present in the holographic meeting, answered, "We studied your military doctrine, Warlord. All of galactic civilizations, combat traditions and tactics. You fight by proven principles because those principles work. But established doctrine creates patterns, and patterns can be predicted." Admiral Krentok, standing beside Vexstar, spoke up. "You predicted our movements in the middle of combat chaos?" "We predicted what your training would tell you to do," Dong Haiyan clarified. "Then we provided solutions that matched your doctrine while achieving our strategic objectives. You did what made tactical sense from your perspective. We just made sure that what made sense to you also helped us." Vexstar was quiet for a long moment. His empire had refined warfare over millennia. Their military academies were legendary. Their warriors were bred and trained from birth. And humans newcomers who'd barely left their home system had turned all that expertise into a predictable pattern they could manipulate. "Your mediation offer," Vexstar said finally. "Does it still stand?" "It does," Haiyan Wu confirmed. "For both you and the Vaxxer Collective, we propose peace talks on neutral ground. Earth's moon, if you're willing. We'll provide security, facilities, and negotiators. No weapons, no fleets, just dialogue. And if the Collective refuses to participate, then you and your people can return home knowing you tried for peace. Earth won't judge you for their choice." Haiyan Wu leaned forward slightly. "But Warlord, consider this. Your fleet suffered significant losses today. So did the Vaxxer. Both your empires are bleeding resources and population. How much longer can this continue? How many more billions must die before someone has the courage to say enough?" After the communication ended, Vexstar turned to Admiral Krentok. "Send a message to the High Council. Recommend we accept Earth's mediation offer. Be honest about what happened here today. Meanwhile, Secretary General Haiyan Wu met with his senior staff. The victory had cost less than everyone feared, but the future remained uncertain. The Vaxxer won't come willingly, diplomat Sujin predicted. They'll see this battle as proof of Krellian weakness, rather than human strength. Director Chanwu nodded. Supreme Commander Nalvex is proud and stubborn. He'll interpret his defeat as a tactical miscalculation, rather than evidence that he should pursue peace. Then we need to convince him that peace serves his interests, Hyenwu said. What motivates him? What does he want? Minister Yunji pulled up intelligence profiles. Nalvex wants to be remembered as the supreme commander who led the collective to victory. He's obsessed with his place in history, so we offer him a different kind of victory, General Songhi suggested. Not military conquest, but being the leader wise enough to end the war before his civilization collapsed. Over the next 3 days, Earth's diplomatic corps worked on crafting a message to the Vaxxer leadership. It wasn't threatening or pleading. Instead, it offered Nalvex a narrative he could accept that continuing the war would destroy both empires. But negotiating from a position of strength would show strategic wisdom. The message emphasized that Earth held no preference between the Dominion and Collective. Humanity simply wanted the killing to stop. If Nalvex came to the negotiating table, he wouldn't be surrendering. He'd be demonstrating the kind of forward-thinking leadership that built lasting civilizations. Supreme Commander Nalvex received the message and spent 2 days, analyzing it from every angle. His military advisors warned that refusing might make the collective appear weak. His economic ministers showed him projections of how much longer they could sustain the war effort. His intelligence services provided detailed analysis of the Sol System battle. Finally, he sent a brief response to Earth. The Vaxxer Collective acknowledges humanity's strength. We will attend mediation talks, but we make no promises of accepting any terms. It was enough 2 weeks after the Battle of Sol System. Representatives from the Krellian Dominion and Vaxxer Collective arrived at Moonbase Tranquility. The facility had been hastily expanded to accommodate high-level diplomatic functions. Human security forces maintained order with professional efficiency, but no weapons were visible. The message was clear. This was a place for words, not warfare. Ambassador Sujin led Earth's mediation team. She was supported by specialists in galactic law, interstellar economics, and conflict resolution. They didn't try to impose human solutions. Instead, they listened to both sides, identified common interests, proposed frameworks that allowed everyone to claim partial victory. The negotiations were brutal. Warlord Vexstar and Supreme Commander Nalvex had decades of hatred between them. Both empires had grievances stretching back generations. Both sides brought positions they swore were non-negotiable. Sujin and her team worked patiently through every issue. When talks stalled, they found new approaches. When emotions ran high, they called recesses. When both sides seemed ready to walk away, it reminded everyone of the cost of failure. On day 37, there was a breakthrough. A territorial dispute that had seemed impossible to resolve was settled through a creative arrangement. Neither side had considered joint administration of contested systems with profits split evenly. It wasn't what either party wanted originally, but it was something both could accept. Other issues fell into place after that. Reparations were structured as economic partnerships rather than punitive payments. Border adjustments were made that gave both sides strategic advantages in different areas. Mechanisms for future dispute resolution were established. On day 48, the Tranquility Accords were signed. The war was officially over. Secretary General Han Wu addressed the United Nations General Assembly back on Earth. The speech was broadcast across the planet and 2 galactic networks. Today, humanity proved we belong among the stars. Not because of our weapons or warships, but because we chose peace when violence was easier. We chose dialogue when isolation was safer. We're still learning, still growing, but we're doing it alongside billions of other beings across the galaxy. This is just the beginning. In the weeks following the Accords, Earth received unprecedented attention. Trade agreements flooded in from species who wanted access to human innovation. Cultural exchange programs were proposed by civilizations curious about the newcomers who'd changed galactic politics. Technology partnerships were offered by governments and corporations alike. The minor species that had broken with the Council over the war now sought formal alliances with Earth. They saw humanity as proof that newcomers could challenge established powers and win not through conquest, but through thinking differently. Ambassador Dayun was officially reinstated to her position, became the Council's formal liaison to Earth. In a private garden in Geneva, she met with Hyan Wu over tea. "The Council is still afraid of you," she said with a slight smile, "but now they're also grateful. That's a rare and powerful combination in galactic politics." "Will they try to limit human expansion?" Hyan Wu asked. "Find ways to contain us." "They'll certainly try," Dayun admitted. "But you've demonstrated that humanity doesn't follow predictable patterns. Every time they think they understand your limitations, you'll probably do something they never imagined." On the Sara Prime, in a small cafe far from the council chambers, Yuna met with Jihai, a young human journalist covering the peace process. They'd become friends during the negotiations, bonding over their shared belief that change was possible. "Do you think it will last?" Yuna asked. "The peace?" Jihai considered the question carefully. "The accords will hold because both sides gained enough to make peace more valuable than continued war. But there will be other conflicts. The galaxy is too diverse and too large for permanent universal peace. And what will humanity do when the next war comes?" "Hopefully what we did this time," Jihai said. "Offer alternatives. Show there's another path besides endless violence." Yuna raised her cup in a toast. "Two alternatives, then. And to the species that reminds us they exist." Years passed. The Battle of Sol System became required study in military academies across hundreds of worlds. Students analyzed how humans used environmental advantages, coordinated with former enemies, and turned conventional doctrine into predictable patterns they could exploit. The lessons changed how every species approached warfare. The Tranquility Accords were studied in political science courses as proof that mediation could succeed even in conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve. Young diplomats learned negotiation techniques that Earth's team had pioneered, and in philosophical debates across thousands of worlds, scholars discussed what it meant that the youngest galactic species had taught everyone lessons about both war and peace. Some argued that humanity's fresh perspective was their greatest advantage. Others suggested that human psychology, their stubbornness, creativity, and refusal to accept limitations made them uniquely suited to solving problems everyone else considered unsolvable in the Galactic Council chambers. Whenever a crisis emerged, one phrase appeared more and more frequently in official discussions and private conversations. "Perhaps we should ask the humans what they think." Humanity hadn't joined the war that nearly consumed the galaxy. They had ended it. And in doing so, they ensured their place among the stars, not as conquerors or warriors, but as the species that proved there was always another way. The galaxy would never be quite the same.